Hello, and welcome to Just One More Thing, a weekly podcast about knitting and crafting. I'm your host, Janessa, and should have done this before I started talking. Just the screen. Just a little. How are you? Did you have a wonderful weekend? Here in the States, it was Labor Day weekend, so everyone had like a long 3-day weekend. It was quite nice. We had good weather, and we did fun things as a family. We have an annual hot air balloon derby that we took the kids to. I'll throw pictures up after the podcast, after the end slide, credit roll, whatever. At the very end, after I'm done yammering, I'll put up some pictures of the kids at the balloon fair festival. They went and picked pumpkins. They had fun with that. And by I mean they picked pumpkins, like they picked pumpkins. A friend of ours has a farm down south of us, and they sell at the local farmer's market, and so this time of year they have pumpkins that they sell. So they went and like picked the pumpkins that are going to be sold and watched pumpkins and things. So they had fun with that, and yeah, it was a nice weekend. I had a productive week, knitting-wise, because that's why we're here, is to talk about the knitting. Yeah? Even though I only worked on like 3 things, it was still a lot of knitting of those 3 things. So let's get started. Last week in finished objects, I didn't really have a finished object. I had finished swatches. I showed you, these are mini shawl swatches that are part of a challenge being run by Frenchie at Aroha Knits. It's on her blog and then like on her Facebook page and Ravelry group and stuff. So it was 5 different countries, 5 different little mini shawls. This was the Shetland swatch, and then there was a bonus Shetland swatch. You saw those last week. I believe I also showed you the Estonian swatch last week. And then I can't remember if this one was done or not, or it hadn't come out yet. But this was the bonus Estonian swatch. So Estonian is known for these little noops, and this one was much more manageable than this one. Noops aren't hard once you get the hang of them, but they can be a little fiddly. So they're not usually people's favorite thing to knit. So the bonus one had much fewer noops than that one. It also didn't have any real shawl shaping. It was just a square swatch. So those were the first 2 days, Shetland and Estonia. Day 3, we went to Russia. So here is the, oh shoot, I'm going to forget the name of the town in Russia that's so well known for the knitting. Oh, that's going to kill me that I can't think of it. You guys are like screaming it at me. You're like, it's this kind of knitting. Maybe I'll like put the name up, because it is escaping me at the minute. I want to say it's like, it starts with an O. That's annoying. I'm sorry. Anyway, this swatch had baubles instead of noops. And you're like, what's the difference? The bauble is a little bit more round, where the noop is a bit more flat. I don't know if I can get them side by side or not. Let's do this. Here we go. So you can see up here, these kind of stick out. They're a little bit more rounded, and these are a bit more, they look like just kind of extra yarn overs. It's a slight difference. There's a very slight difference in construction. they kind of achieve the same effect. So I suppose in your knitting and your designing, it's just what you prefer, or you know, what you want it to look like. But anyway, that was the Russian swatch. And then we moved on to Japan. So here's the Japanese. This one was a little difficult for me because you didn't have lace only on one side. Most people are used to lace knitting where you do your yarn overs and your decreases on the right side of the knitting, and then your wrong side is a rest row. But this was like a true lace pattern where you had shaping and yarn overs on both sides. So yeah, having to do like purl two togethers and purl two through the back loop and trying to make sure that I was doing them in the right direction. It took a little bit of thinking. It wasn't hard, I just had to think about it a little bit. So anyway, that was the Japan swatch. And then this morning we got day 5. And I just cast it on this morning, so I haven't gotten very far on it. But day 5 is New Zealand, which oddly enough doesn't have a super, for all the sheep that they grow and the New Zealand wool and all that. They're more known for weaving than they are for knitting. But the lady who runs this challenge, she said in her email this morning that she has Maori heritage, and so what is that? I got a weird float going on or something. Yikes. I didn't catch a float. Whoops. Anyway, so even though they don't have a strong knitting heritage, they do have a strong textile from that country, and so it's a color work motif of one of the traditional Maori designs is what we're working on for the number 5 challenge. My color work is not my strongest suit. You always, when people do color work, they always want to show you the back. So I've kind of been pretty good about catching floats, except for this random one here. I don't know why where I missed catching that, but I'll have to, I don't know, snip it and weave it in or something. Figure something out for that. But yeah, so it's just a very small swatch at the moment, but we'll see how it comes along, and you'll see it on next week's podcast. And I just lost a needle. I'm all over the place today, guys. Sorry. So the swatches have been fun. Brooklyn keeps asking me when she can use them because her toys are just in desperate need of shawls. You know. I told her, I was like, well, then I guess maybe you need to figure out how to knit and you can make your own. I offered to teach her, but she was doing too many other important things this weekend to sit down and concentrate on crafting. Next up, let's talk about, I'm going to go a little bit out of order. I'm going to talk about something I started last night. Just because the third thing that I worked on is going to take up like the majority of the time. So I talked 2 weeks back after I made the sloth that I was going to work on a baby blanket, and that I was going to do the chevron baby blanket and yada yada yada. I changed my mind at the last minute last night, and I decided I wanted to do a cabled baby blanket. And after kind of looking for some patterns, I picked bits and pieces out of ones that I really liked, and I'm kind of making my own. So this is the first of 3 panels. I'm going to do 3 panels, each exactly the same, and then sew them together to make the baby blanket. And I'm just doing like a double seed stitch kind of panel in between. There you can kind of see the horseshoe cables. The gal that this is going to, they like horses, so I figured it would be kind of fitting to do a little horseshoe cable on the baby blanket. And so, yeah, I worked that up last night. I'll do the 3 panels, I'll sew them together, easy peasy. So that will get done pretty soon. Now on to the big one. And spoiler alert, I'm going to take a drink of coffee before we get started because this one's going to be a long one. If you have any desire whatsoever to not be spoiled about the Andrea Mowry What the Fade knit along that she is doing, fast forward to the end and see the cute pictures of my kids at the balloon derby. Because yeah, that's pretty much what I'm going to be talking about the rest of the time that we're here. So thanks for joining in. If you're not interested in hearing this part of the podcast or you don't want to be spoiled, yeah, that's the only other thing that I worked on this week. It was quite involved. So let's start with, I showed you the 4 skeins that I had already spun last week that I wanted to be able to do a completely hand spun shawl. When I did this one, when I did the Hohi Mystery Knit Along, I had 2 different hand spun yarns in that, and every time I came to those colors, those were my favorite parts, knitting with my hand spun. So this time around, I can't talk today. This time around, I wanted to do completely 100% all of my hand spun yarns. So I needed to spin 2 more skeins, which I did. I do not have them, how should I put this? I did not, like, measure them or weigh them or anything. I spun them, I washed them, I caked them up so I could get knitting on them. But, what did I find? Here we go. So, this was the Shetland wool. It's just all natural Shetland. So it's a nice gray, kind of speckly gray because of the natural colors in Shetland wool. I made it a 2-ply, just like all the other ones that I have in there. I'm guessing this was around 3-ish ounces. And this is my color D. The other one, actually will grab the crinkly bag. It was this fiber from Sincerely Yours, which is a superwash merino. Undo it so you can see. It was a nice creamy color with lots of kinds of browns and greens. There we go. In there. And that spun up into this really gorgeous, I want to call it like a lettuce green color. It's a really kind of grayish, greenish, kind of tonal color is what it spun up to. And again, I did a 2-ply on that. But I really like how you really can't see the green. It doesn't like scream green at you. But when you put it next to, hang on. This is the Hedwig colorway from Once Upon a Corgi that I spun. So this one was much more like bluish grays and browns and cream, and this one was greenish gray. There we go. You can see the difference. Like, they both have that gray overtone, that creamy color, but this one ends up being a little bit more almost like a silvery green color, whereas this one's like a stormy gray color. Anyway, so I spun up those two colors. So then I have all of my colors, and I'll show them to you in order. This is my A. This is the Hedwig that I spun from Once Upon a Corgi. This one's B. That was the Sincerely Yours. And then C was the Deep Stash Marled, brown and white. So we have this like whitish color into a kind of grayish silver color. And then I picked up the cream from these two and I started introducing the brown. So it's A, B, C, D. I put back this gray. To kind of, because I thought the brownish bits in the Shetland, even though it was more of a gray color, kind of picked up on those. So that was D. And then E was this Reinerdine from Into the World. So I started picking out a lot more of the browns. And then my final color, F, is going to be that deep chocolate brown to pull out the browns all around. So those are my 6 colors that I'm working on for this project. All hand spun, all a fairly skinny 2-ply. I would call it lace, but there's some parts that end up being just a little bit thicker than others. So maybe super light fingering, heavy lace overall, with the exception of this one, which is a single ply. This is the only non-2-ply yarn that I have going on in there. So all my yarns got spun, but going into this, I knew that I was going to have to learn to knit brioche. The pattern said that it would have brioche in it. I've never knit brioche before at all. I've seen it. I've heard people talk about it. I've heard how everyone loves it. And they're like, why have I never knit brioche before? Oh my goodness, what was I missing out on? My life was not complete until I learned to knit brioche. Like, it's just, everyone just loves it after they've done it. And I was just kind of like, it looks a little hard. You have to knit rows twice? I don't know if I have time for that. No thanks. I just kind of always passed it by. I never quite understood the brioche craze, but I do love the fade patterns. So it's like, maybe I'll learn brioche. Just get it out of the way. Even if you decide you don't like it later on, like, whatever. At least now you know how to do it. So I decided that before I tried to learn brioche using my precious hand-spun yarn, I should probably learn to do it with some not so precious yarn. Watched several videos and failed miserably trying to learn this stitch, and I could not figure out what I was doing wrong. Thankfully, when Clue 1 came out, and it's a good thing I decided to try and learn this like before the Clue came out, because Clue number 1 is all brioche. The entire, it's like, there's not just like a little section of brioche, it's like the entire first Clue is in brioche. So I obviously needed to learn how to do it pretty quickly. Thankfully, Andrea put in some videos with the pattern as well, and I don't know why her version made it click for me, because I watched 2 other really good videos about how to knit brioche, but I just could not understand it. Um, I, I couldn't figure out what they were doing. I don't know. I have a feeling it's because Andrea showed how to work it both English style throwing and continental style picking. And I'm a picker, not a thrower. And I think seeing how she did it continental is what really made me go, oh, I was doing my wraps all wrong. Because when you brioche, you do a slip one yarn over move that puts on that little yarn over with the stitch. And I was like wrapping it in the wrong direction. I think I was holding my yarn behind or something. I was off, completely off with it. But for some reason, the way she did her video, her little instruction video, really made it click, and I knit this. So this was kind of her like cast on and set up and knitting brioche. And I'm just using 2 of the Knit Pick Stroll colors. Marsala Tweed and Basalt Heather are the 2 colors. I thought they contrasted nicely. I thought I'll give this a try. So I was really, really excited that I actually knit brioche and there aren't really any mistakes. So, and I learned how to do, like I've always done garter tab cast-ons for shawls. I learned how to do an I-cord tab and edging, and now I want to just I-cord edge everything because I think this looks so much neater and tidier than like a garter row selvage edge. I like it. I like it a lot. I'll be using it even on things that don't call for it. So that was my practice, and I was like, okay, we've got this. And I cast on clue 1, and here we go. Are you ready? Here it is. Ta-da! So this is the entirety of clue 1. We started out with colors A and D. So, the Once Upon a Corgi, Hedwig, and the Shetland Natural. And then we faded, you can kind of see it there, into B and E, which is the Sincerely Yours, I don't even know what that colorway was called, the greenish one, and the Reinerdine from Into the World. So you can kind of see. Here's the, what I'm calling the right side. And the wrong side. So the pattern does call for a light fingering single kind of yarn, or like a fingering weight yarn. Because mine's so much thinner, like it is a little more airy looking, a little more wispy looking. But overall, I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. There were a couple of spots where I was not paying attention down here in the fade. I don't know if you can see it very well. I messed up a couple of the rows, like, and I got off on the color pattern that was supposed to go on there, but in the end, I don't think it really matters all that much. It faded, and I think that was probably the most important thing, is that you faded the colors. I just didn't fade them in the right order that the pattern called for. Oh well, no big deal. So I'm excited to see what comes next. Now that I've learned brioche and I understand brioche, I kind of want the entire shawl to be that. Which is crazy, I know, but I kind of do. So clue number 2, I think comes out, I want to say on Thursday. So just a couple more days. So maybe I'll have Clue 2 finished by the time we talk next week. I don't know for sure. I just don't know what I'll have done in that respect. We'll just have to kind of see what it involves. But yes, my What the Fade mystery shawl is off to a good start. I actually plan to go ahead and keep knitting on this. I'm basically going to do What the Unfade shawl. I've decided that I'm going to go ahead and just use these two colors. Like, instead of fading out colors, I'm just going to always use these two colors. And I'm just going to knit it up and have this be pretty much like the exact same pattern as What the Fade, except it won't be a fade. It'll just be these two colors. So I'll have two What the Fades because I'm going to knit them like concurrently. So yeah, that's kind of what has been happening in the knitting this week. Like I said, a short episode, pretty much all about What the Fade. Next week I'll try to have a better variety of things to show off. So until then, I'll see you next week and enjoy these fun pictures of my kids at the Blue Derby.